The fourth book in A Song of Ice and Fire is entitled A Feast for Crows, and one of those crows who comes to feast on the corpse of Westeros is one Aurane Waters, a bastard of House Velaryon. He is our one most important character from that family in the main series, and we see him emerge as a prominent player in King's Landing in that fourth novel in the series. He becomes the master of ships, largely because Cersei Lannister, who's running the kingdom, thinks he's incredibly attractive, and as I've stated in the past, he is the worst master of ships to ever hold that position, for at least Westeros as a whole. He does a great job for Aurane Waters, because Aurane Waters creates this massive new fleet for the Seven Kingdoms, as most of the ships that were possessed by the Crown were destroyed in the Battle of the Blackwater and Tyrion's various shenanigans there. He creates this fleet of truly massive Drummonds that end up kind of bankrupting the Crown, leading to all of Cersei's issues with the Iron Bank and with the Faith, so he is very much a core problem for Cersei in A Feast for Crows, or at least the core issue that starts a path of problems, a bad choice road, if you will. But overall, he has a very important role to play in the future of the series, as naval support is something that is in very short supply in Westeros at present. Or I should say, it will be in short supply. Right now, there are a lot of ships swarming around Westeros. Specifically, the most powerful fleet in the kingdom is the Red Wine fleet, owned by the Red Wines, as the name would imply, of the Arbor, and they are currently sailing around the continent to make war with one Euron Greyjoy and his fleet. The Iron Fleet itself has mostly gone east with Victarion. Euron's ships aren't really that impressive, but there's reason to believe that he's going to use this massive blood sacrifice ritual to create some sort of monstrous aberration to pull the Red Wine ships under. And I would guess that would destroy a fair few of his ships in the process as well. I think Euron is someone who's very magical, but I'm not positive he'll fully be able to control whatever he ends up getting out of the deep, which is probably going to be a Kraken. In the aftermath of that Battle of Blood, which will happen very early on in the Winds of Winter, if the Forsaken sample chapters to be believed, we will have probably one main naval force other than maybe whatever remains of Euron's Ironborn in Westeros, and that force is Aurane Waters. As soon as Cersei Lannister is arrested at the end of A Feast for Crows by the Faith, Aurane Waters bounces with his massive fleet. I should say fleet massive in terms of the size of the individual ships, rather than the number of ships. It's quality over quantity in this situation. And we hear of him in the Winds of Winter. Specifically, in Aerion's sample chapters, we hear that a new pirate king has set himself up in the Stepstones, that being the Lord of the Waters. The ruler of Driftmark is known as the Lord of the Tides, as you would know from seeing the best episode of House of the Dragon, which is named after that title. And Lord of the Waters is kind of a play on that, given that, his last name is Waters. He's a bastard of House Velaryon, so he's kind of bastardizing their house title. That seems to be a very good position to set himself up, as if anybody wants to sail up towards Westeros, they are going to have to go through the Stepstones, and all of those forces could include Daenerys's, Victarions, Eurons. All of these people would need to pass the Stepstones in order to make it back to the capital. All of this has raised questions. Aurane Waters has been brought up in the Winds of Winter. He is a Chekhov's gun ready to go off. What role is he going to play therein? Who is he going to support for the throne? I don't think Aurane Waters, the Pirate King, is trying to get the Iron Throne on his own as much as I'd support him. I do think he is very likely to throw in with one of the other candidates who are currently vying for the throne. But who exactly might that be? There's a really good series by Glidus from way back when where he talks about Aurane Waters pretty in depth. And one of the conclusions he comes to is that there could be this connection between Aurane Waters and Stannis Baratheon, as the first time we encounter Aurane Waters, he is swearing loyalty to Joffrey after losing on Stannis' side at the Blackwater. And while I think that connection is interesting to seize on, I don't think it is super relevant for Aurane's story going forward. I think if it were, he would have gone north instead of south, as it's pretty public knowledge that Stannis is in the north at this point, and going to the Stepstones really wouldn't advance that cause further. With that said, I do think that Stannis could have been a thought in Aurane's mind when he was trying to build this massive fleet and just kind of bounce afterwards and leave Cersei in a terrible position. This could be some sort of vengeance for Stannis and what happened on the Blackwater, but I don't think that Aurane is consciously working for Stannis. I think in setting up in the Stepstones, he is not working for anyone in particular. I think he is purely an opportunist. And I think that opportunism is going to be reflected in the ruler he eventually supports. Specifically, I think we are going to see a union of Aurane Waters' ships and the cause of Aegon the Sixth Targaryen. Just at a base level, both of these individuals have questionable parentage and are, known for their Valyrian looks, and both of them get by at least a little bit before looking like Rhaegar, which is pretty interesting because the reason Cersei has a crush on Aurane is the fact that Aurane looks like Rhaegar, and obviously young Griff looks like Rhaegar, given that Rhaegar is his supposed son, and we see that thought in Jon Connington's head, that there are some differences, and obviously Jon Connington is looking at Aegon in a paternal light rather than being in love with him as Cersei was attracted to Aurane Waters, but I digress. Regardless of that, I think there are a lot of parallels between Aegon the Sixth and Aurane Waters, and the two of them complement each other quite well. I also want to interrupt myself to ask what you think of Aurane Waters, his story so far, and where exactly he might be going. Let me know in the comments while you're down there. Leave a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and it does really help grow the channel. Aegon the Sixth is landing on Westeros with only about 10,000 swords to his name. He has the Golden Company at his back, one of the most feared sellsword companies in all of Essos, but that is not much to claim an entire continent, and they don't have much of a naval presence. All of them came over on ships, but those ships are pretty disorganized. We learn in the Griffin Reborn chapter that they've kind of scattered to the wind and the storms coming over. We saw the same thing happen to Victarion ships, so it just tends to happen, and only about half to a third of them have landed by the time of the Griffin Reborn itself. It seems like more have landed in Aerion's sample chapters in the Winds of Winter, but overall that does raise some questions of where they're landing and where this information is spreading. If I were a betting man, I would say at least some of those ships washed ashore in the Stepstones, and while there might have been initial hostilities between those ships and Aurane Waters, I think having heard the news that there is this new conquering king that Aurane could devote his ships to and maybe gain legitimacy as master of ships again and maybe even be legitimized as a Velaryon, which I'm surprised Cersei didn't do for him, that could be a great opportunity for the young Lord of the Waters. George R. R. Martin's history is like poetry. It rhymes, and there is one example in Targaryen history of an individual with Valyrian ancestry naming themselves King of the Stepstones. That, of course, being Daemon, the Rogue Prince, insert guitar riff here, Targaryen, I almost said Blackfire. In this instance, we see Daemon fighting alongside Corlys Velaryon, claiming the Stepstones from the Crab Feeder, and naming himself their king, before arriving in King's Landing and dramatically ceding his crown to Viserys, his brother. In this instance, there is Valyrian involvement, there is an individual naming themselves King of the Stepstones, and there is a dramatic moment where they cede their crown and swear their allegiance to a ruler. And I think we're going to have a pretty exact echo of that with the Lord of the Waters. Aurane Waters has already done step one. He's named himself King of the Stepstones, and now he just needs to find the perfect moment to declare his loyalty for Aegon, perhaps ferrying his forces into King's Landing, knowing that they have no naval defense as he stole it all. George R. R. Martin has continually referred to a second Dance of the Dragons happening at some point during main series A Song of Ice and Fire. And while the Velaryon ships did have a big role in the first Dance of the Dragons in supporting Rhaenyra, this female Targaryen claimant with perhaps a better claim to the throne, I think that it won't be the same in this instance. When he says there's going to be a second Dance of the Dragons, that doesn't mean that every single element is going to be repeated one to one. I think it's going to be something of a remix of the Dance of the Dragons. Dance of the Dragons radio edit, because it will have to be a hell of a lot shorter to actually fit into what remains of the series. I think one of the elements that will be flipped from what it was is the Velaryon fleet supporting the Aegon in this situation, who is also named Aegon, rather than supporting Daenerys, who would be closer to Rhaenyra. I also think where we're hearing about Aurane Waters is relevant to where he will crop up again in the story. We're hearing about him in the Aerion sample chapters for the Winds of Winter, and as far as we currently understand, Aerion is going to be one of our main viewpoint characters on Aegon's path forward. So I do think that this is kind of setting the groundwork for maybe him cropping up again later on in her chapters, and given her prior, attraction to certain individuals, maybe she'll also be attracted to Aurane Waters. We shall see, but I do think it'll be fairly interesting to see him kind of added into this already developing cast of characters around the new king. It's also worth noting that Auraine's role in the narrative for all of the other claimants have pretty much been filled. I don't think Stannis has much story left in the South. I think if he survives whatever's going on in and around Winterfell, his story will reside in the far north. Daenerys already has a navy. While her admiral Grolio was recently killed, she does have Victarion arriving alongside the Iron Fleet, and if I had to guess, Victarion is going to end up serving Daenerys as her new admiral. And additionally, Euron has his Iron Fleet as well, obviously, and he'll probably have some sort of magic fueling him. Tommen doesn't have a fleet, but I don't think that A, Tommen's cause is going to stick around that long, and B, if Aurane intended on being loyal to Tommen, he probably would have, stayed loyal to Tommen. I did a video probably almost a year ago now discussing George R.R. Martin's favorite houses, and of the ones he has actively discussed and admitted to being his favorites, Velaryon is one that has always stood out to me because yes, there is a lot of kind of role for the Velaryons in the expanded material, but I very much think that tends to be a house that he has developed an affection for over the years, and I think we're going to see that manifest in the Winds of Winter through Aurane Waters having this expanded role and potentially being legitimized as the now true heir to his house, allowing Martin to write more about this family that he does very much enjoy writing about. So I'm very excited to see it. I hope we get to see maybe Driftmark at some point. It'd be cool to see Corlys Velaryon's museum at some point in the main series, but it is also just cool to see it in House of the Dragon, so need to have any sort of connection there. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and it does really help grow the channel. I'll have many more videos for you in the near future on A Song of Ice and Fire, House of the Dragon, and Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and Game of Thrones. We are heading into law school finals season here, so I might be a bit harder to reach for the next couple weeks, but once those are over, I look forward to having a very prosperous holiday season, and hopefully sharing a lot of videos with all of you for that occasion. I have a fair few planned already, and I look forward to getting those out there. See y'all soon.